Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the Russian-Ukrainian war. And today we are taking a broad look at the current and ongoing force dispositions we are seeing within the conflict. So first, as you can see, you see NATO symbology. Normally at the brigade level with some battalion, regiment, and even division and corps examples displayed. But as you'll notice, the Ukrainians have a tremendous amount of forces deployed running from Luhansk all the way south towards Donetsk in the eastern Donbass. The vast majority of their forces are deployed in this direction, and obviously that is because the Russian center of gravity right now in terms of their continued operations against the Ukrainians are very much centered towards Bakhmut and Avdiivka in this area. And you can obviously see here in Avdiivka the deployment of Ukrainian forces. You have the 115th Mechanized Brigade being supported by the 4th Kiev Special Police Force Regiment of the National Guard. You have the 503rd Marine Battalion, normally based in Mariupol, that has been overrun and captured, obviously, by Russian forces. The Armored Reserve is the 3rd Tank Brigade. To the north, the 110th Mechanized Brigade. Further to the south of Avdiivka, the 46th Air Mobile Brigade and the 21st Motorized Battalion Sarmat of the 56th Motorized Rifle Brigade. And if we go further north and we start, obviously we're seeing elements of anywhere from 70 to 80 Ukrainian combat brigades deployed in the direction of Russian forces. That's a significant force, considering that the entire Russian military at the start of this campaign, in all probability, was about that size in total force construct. So you can see the massive amount of mobilization that has taken place in Ukraine. If we go to the north, you'll have Kharkov deployed in Kharkov. Namely, these are National Guard units. Again, both the National Guard of Ukraine and the National Guard of the Russian Federation are both full-time active duty forces. These are not deployed reserve forces. This is a full-time active duty paramilitary organization that leans heavily towards a conventional military operation. It is a parallel force besides that stand beside the active ground force of Ukraine. The ground forces, and the same with Russia as well. But in Kharkov, you have the 5th Brigade National Guard. You have the Kharkiv Battalion Special Police Force, 103rd Territorial Defense Battalion. Obviously, these are not National Guards. These are Territorial Defense Forces, and you'll see a wide array of these activated Territorial Defense Forces. These were very, very key and pivotal for Ukraine as the Russians invaded, especially near Kiev. The East Company Special Police Force, Ares Special Intelligence Battalion, National Guard, 3rd Operational Brigade, National Guard. Again, this is more of a conventional motorized rifle brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. And then the 3020 Anti-Aircraft Missile Division. If we go closer to the border area, you have, again, more territorial defenses, 127th Defense Brigade, and these are varied in size, as are all Ukrainian brigades due to the ongoing conflict. Again, more territorial defenses, the 113th Territorial Defense Brigade. Then we have an actual active duty unit here, the 14th Mechanized Brigade, the Kraken Special Operations Battalion. It's an intelligence battalion. 92nd Mechanized Brigade, 92nd Mechanized Brigade. These are, again, active duty units. These were involved in that Ukrainian offensive operation that drove Russian forces out of this area. 109th Territorial Brigade, 80th Air Assault Brigade, 45th Artillery Brigade, 25th Air Mobile Brigade. On the line of contact, 95th Air Mobile Brigade, 66th Mechanized Infantry Brigade, 105th Territorial Brigade, 1st Battalion of Operational Purpose Special Operations Unit, National Guard Battalion, 1st Battalion Special Operations Forces, National Guard, 103rd Defense Brigade, 46th Assault Battalion, Donbass, 27th Separate Brigade, National Guard, 54th Brigade, Mechanized Infantry, 114th Defense Brigade, Territorials, 15th Sloviansk Regiment, National Guard, 15th Artillery Recon Brigade, 10th Mountain Assault Brigade, 118th Territorial Defense Brigade, 71st Jager Brigade Light Infantry, 93rd Mechanized Brigade. And we'll stop right there at this highway, and then we'll look at Russian force disposition facing off against the forces I just talked about on the Ukrainian side. And again, you'll see less Russian units specified, but at the same time, you have allegedly divisional assets deployed here as well, such as the 4th Tank Division, Russian Federation. That unit is normally based near Moscow. 144th Motorized Division, and these are all operating under the 1st Guards Tank Army. 2nd Motorized Brigade, 752nd Motorized Regiment. That is an element of another larger unit. Same with this. 237th Tank Regiment. It's a bridging unit. 208th Motorized Regiment. And the Bars Infantry Battalion. So again, this is very speculative in terms of what the Russians have deployed in this area, and it's probably more accurate in terms of the actual Ukrainian defense force or Ukrainian armed forces force disposition. And then we'll start again with the 4th Rapid Response Brigade of the Ukrainian National Guard. Again, National Guard unit. This is a more elite unit of the Ukrainian National Guard forces. The 214th the 58th Motorized Brigade, 6th Battalion, 7th Special Operations Center, SF units, assigned to the Ukrainian Special Forces Command, Special Operations Command, 24th Mechanized Brigade, 53rd Mechanized Brigade, 62nd Mechanized Brigade, 30th Mechanized Brigade. And clearly you can see here the forces running south of Bakhmut. These are not territorial forces. These are fully active duty Ukrainian Mechanized Brigade. Normally these have an attached tank battalion along with their mechanized infantry maneuver battalions as well. 5th Infantry Assault Regiment. And then backing those forces up, the 112th Territorial Brigade. Now you have artillery assets such as the 40th Artillery Brigade and then the Special Police Force Battalion, Lviv. Free Russia Regiment, Russian Democratic Republic. These are opposition force units that have supposedly been created by Russian opposition. 1st Presidential Brigade, National Guard. Now, this is very interesting. This unit is normally deployed for in Kiev, and it's designed to protect the regime of Zelensky, the presidential security forces. And it's interesting that this unit is displayed close to the front lines. So again, can we verify that? Is it just elements of the 1st Presidential Brigade? Very difficult to say at this point. But it's interesting to see that that unit is allegedly deployed there. 110th Mechanized Brigade, and now we're heading more towards, and we're getting into the area near south of Horlovika in Donetsk. 3rd Tank Brigade, 4th Kiev Special Police Force Regiment, 115th Mechanized Brigade, 503rd Marine Brigade, 46th Air Mobile Brigade, 21st Motorized Battalion, Sarmat, 56th Motorized Rifle Brigade, 56th Motorized Brigade, 18th Battalion, 35th Marine Brigade, operating very close, if not with it, 1st Battalion, 1st Tank Brigade. This unit normally is based and operates up in Chernihiv, which is up in here. '72nd Mechanized Brigade, another Yager unit, light infantry, 68th Yager Brigade. These units were pivotal in operations against Russian forces when they invaded and came in through Belarus with the assigned objectives of taking control of Kiev. These units, these Yager brigades, gave the Russians fits in the forested regions near the Belarusian-Ukrainian border. 37th Battalion, 56th Motorized Brigade, 108th Defense Brigade, Territorials, 102nd Defense Brigade, Territorials, 110th Defense Brigade, Territorials, 65th Mechanized Brigade, 9th Operational Regiment, National Guard, 23rd Public Protection Brigade, National Guard. So obviously, this is speculative at the same time based on actual information that exists. But a massive amount of forces by the Ukrainian military and, again, the Russian. This is a high-intensity military campaign that we are continuing to see by both sides. And if you look at areas to the south near Avdiivka, again, very difficult to say what actually is being deployed by the Russians. According to this, you have the 9th Marine Regiment, 1st Motorized Brigade of the Donetsk Republic, 100th Motorized Brigade, DNR, 5th Motorized Brigade, Oplet. That's Russian sympathetic forces that were based in Donetsk. 11th Motorized Regiment, Vostok. And what's interesting, you don't see any Wagner units listed here. You don't see any other forces, and there has to be more Russian forces deployed in this area than obviously what's displayed on this map. It's just not displayed because the information is not ready available in terms of what the Russians have deployed. In the west, based on probably not updated information, but what the Russians have on the eastern bank now of Kherson, 93rd Air Assault Brigade, a unidentified battalion tactical group, the 11th Air Assault Brigade out of Ulan-Undi, another battalion tactical group unidentified, a motorized brigade unidentified, battalion tactical group unidentified, and the same. And then you have the 108th Air Assault Regiment, which we know was also deployed on the western bank at one point. But again, I think this just gives you an idea of how significant the Ukrainians have mobilized and deployed forces facing off against Russia. And it's difficult to right now to ascertain what the Russian military, the Russian ground forces, Russian National Guard looks like at large. Obviously, things are changing. Forces are being constructed. Forces are being reconstituted from what happened earlier and earlier engagements and campaigns throughout the conflict. If we go up real quick and we look what's near Kiev, at least according to this map, not a lot. You have the 25th Public Protection Brigade, National Guard, and you have the Kiev Regiment Special Police Force to the north of Kiev, approaching Chernobyl. You have a mechanized battalion, 30th Mechanized Brigade, 1st State Facilities Protection Battalion. This was the unit designed to defend Chernobyl. 115th Defense Brigade Territorials. And as we're moving along the Belarusian border. So not a lot in terms of what the Ukrainians have deployed in this area. And they're all territorial defense brigades. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 territorial defense brigades, another state, 5th State Facilities Protection Battalion. So again, as we have talked about the possibility of a new Russian operation coming out of Belarus, not a lot of forces deployed in this area, and that has to lead you to believe that the Ukrainians at this moment are simply not worried about a Belarusian joint Russian operation taking place again. So very interesting map, a lot of information to look at and to consider, but this is currently what we have to work with in terms of Ukrainian and even Russian force dispositions, but that gives you a pretty good idea of what we're seeing on the ground right now. And again, it just shows you just how much mobilization has taken place inside of Ukraine, and obviously you have that Western assistance in terms of the deployment of weapon systems, and we really don't know what that looks like in terms of those weapon systems being handed out to individual Ukrainian units. There is a hodgepodge of equipment being utilized by the Ukrainians, and in terms of both tanks, armored fighting vehicles, and of what have you, even personal infantry weapons vary as well. Mostly we see AK variants. But that does it. I hope you enjoyed the map. It gives you an idea of the total force disposition. And again, as I've talked about before, if the Russians were to mount a successful operation running south to north along the Dnieper River, starting from Zaporizhia, in an attempt to cut off the Dnieper River, and again further to the north up here near the Hamel region, running north to south. If the Russians were able to successfully launch an operation to cut off the Dnieper River and encircle Ukrainian forces in this area, they would encircle a massive amount of Ukrainian active duty combat brigades. Massive amounts. So you have to wonder what the Russians have planned, and then at the same time, how the Ukrainians are going to counter said Russian plans. And obviously the Ukrainians may have plans of their own, which we undoubtedly know they do. But again, we will continue to cover the war, the conflict, and we will bring you more information. Thank you for joining us today. More to come.